Hello, everyone. This is Dave Fernandez from Coach Your Way School with our second interview in this What It Takes to Be a Coach series. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Sharon Malone from the Malone Group, and they are a company that pretty much specializes in cultivating leadership, executive assessments, executive coaching, cultural change, leadership development, succession planning, and executive searches. She's a 25-year corporate veteran that turned into a business owner about 10 years ago. Tell us a little bit about that transition, Sharon.
Okay, great. Thanks, David, for having me, by the way. Yes, I moved about 10 years ago from corporate life, which had been my whole life since I was 23 years old, to doing my own thing. And it was something that I'd thought about for a while. You know, when you think about the vision of your future self, I knew that I wanted a couple of things. I wanted more flexibility in my life. And I also wanted to get closer to making a difference to an individual or to individuals on a daily basis. In the corporate world, I was having an impact by creating people strategies and implementing them, but I'd gotten farther away from impacting individuals and leaders than I would have liked. So those were, I think, the two driving forces in the change that I made.
The transition per se, how did you know you were actually ready to make this transition?
Well, you know, I had spent most of my career in one company at Cigna Corporation, and then I went to another company, ING, and I spent almost 4 years there. And I think that was a really important move for me because I got to see a different corporate model and how a different company works. And I got to practice sort of being a new person and practice learning about how a company operates and what their culture is. And so I think actually that move was important in preparing me.
When did you feel that you got that call to be a coach, to help other people, you know, in their careers or succeed? Like, when did you experience for the first time that calling?
Right. Well, you know, my whole career has been spent in human resources. So I have been coaching and mentoring and counseling people for my whole career.
Okay.
And people, I must have some sort of knack for it because I found that people wanted to talk to me. They were eager to have me question them and challenge them and champion them. And so it was something that I knew early on that was a sort of a capability of mine. So it just progressed from there.
Awesome. So obviously, you know, it became kind of natural for you because you were already in that path, you know, in HR, right? So it felt kind of natural for you. And I'm sure you
Absolutely.
got a lot of training throughout your career on.
Yeah, that's a great question because I did get a lot of good training. And for someone who wants to strike out on their own as a coach, I would say to take advantage of any training opportunity along those lines that anybody wants to offer you. So I had the chance to go to the Center for Creative Leadership and be trained in some of their programs, for example. I became certified in Myers-Briggs while I was in the corporate world, which you may know is equal to a 3-credit college course. So I was building my toolkit all along. So when I left first to go to a consulting firm, Beam Pines, and then eventually to start the Malone Group, I felt like I had a really good starter toolkit.
Having had all this training, or aside from having all this training over the years, have you ever been coached?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I got my formal coach training at the Coaches Training Institute.
Okay.
And one requirement for them is that you be coached.
Okay.
So I was coached by a woman who I'd worked with in corporate America previously, who had struck out on her own maybe 10 years prior and is a wonderful coach.
Interesting.
So she was my formal coach, but I also feel like I've been coached and mentored by many people. And I've also, one of the leaders I had the chance to work with over my career, she has the philosophy that everybody should have their own personal board of directors or board of advisors. And so I followed that as well. And so I have a core group of people that I reach out to and talk with and on a daily basis, and they sort of know they're on my informal board of advisors.
Yeah. Like your mastermind,
So
personal mastermind.
there you go.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think I totally agree with you. It's key to have that group of people that you can rely on and openly share concerns and get advice from, etc. on a regular basis. It's just having perspective around you.
Yep, that's right.
What are some of the challenges that you have experienced as a coach, meaning coaching other people? What are some of the challenges that you've been through?
In the actual coaching itself?
Yeah.
Challenges. Well, one thing I would say is that the client, the person I'm coaching, needs to be a full partner in the coaching, right? They need to be engaged, be interested in it, be willing to talk about things and get to the heart of things. And so I've had a couple of occasions where the client has wanted to keep things sort of at a very surface level and not sort of open up and talk about how they're doing and what could make them more successful. And that's a challenge. I would say that's the biggest challenge that I faced. And I found that a couple of times earlier in my coaching career. So now I do a better job of really asking those questions at the chemistry meeting, where the client's trying me on for size. I do a better job of getting underneath why they want to have a coach, what they want from the experience, how they're looking at the experience. So I think I've done a better job of avoiding those situations.
Do you think that anybody can be coached?
I do, yeah. I think some people, if you think of it as a continuum, I think some people are more open to coaching, to trying out new skill sets, to changing behaviors than others. But I've yet to find anybody who can't get some value of it, whether it's a little value to a lot of value. Thankfully, I haven't found anybody yet who can't get some value from it.
So when you started transitioning, how did you plan for it? Did you plan for it? How did you come to the realization, like, this is the time I'm going to do it, and this is how I'm going about it?
Right. Well, yeah, I planned for it a little bit. I had actually, if we rewind, I had almost a year between when I left Cigna and when I started at ING. Actually, during that year is when I started my own little LLC. And during that year is when I went to the Coaches Training Institute and got my 118 hours of foundational coaching experience. Mm-hmm. So that was sort of the first planning step that I took. I knew I needed to embellish the toolkit that I got from corporate America. Mm-hmm. And then I took a detour because I was pursued by ING and went there to become their head of talent management and talent acquisition. So I put the Malone Group and my coach training on ice to take this other corporate opportunity, which as I mentioned, I valued because it was such a great chance to see how a different company worked. Mm-hmm. And then in 2009, when I went back to coaching, I joined a consulting firm, Beam Pines. And that's where I first got to try out my coaching skills mm-hmm. and talents. And, one thing that I did was I approached colleagues, leaders that I had known in my corporate life, and asked them if they would allow me to serve as their coach. And I charged a very nominal fee, mm-hmm. but I did charge them. And it really allowed me to build up my coaching experience, right? Because I had a list of experiences that I could mention about. I've coached a vice president of this or a director of that. And so that was not any kind of a moneymaker, but it was a great experience builder. And things just took off from there.
How did you come up with that idea?
Actually, I think it was probably mentioned by the Coaches Training Institute in terms of how to build your practice.
Oh, okay.
Is to start in that direction, right?
So somebody like looking to become a coach, couple of things. Do you think that they need some type of HR background, or can any background help in some way, make make a great coach out of somebody?
Right. Well, we're talking about the executive coaching arena, right? The leadership coaching arena.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've seen coaches come mainly from 3 walks of life and be successful. So one is a corporate HR background, especially strategic HR.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've seen people come from a business background. So running a P&L, running a small organization, running a division of a large organization. And then the third area that I've seen coaches come from is academia. So university, professorship, that kind of thing, especially in the area of psychology. And I do think you need some kind of a background like that to be credible and to have the world experiences that a person is looking for when they seek a coach. So they have to know, the person you're coaching has to know that you get it, that you've been there, and that you have something to offer them in terms of helping them to sort through whatever topics they want to address.
Right. So when you encounter a new opportunity to coach someone, what are the things that you must know about them in order to figure out if you are the person for them? How do you gauge if you guys are a good fit?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I do think fit is really important. And one of the measures that I use is that if my client looks at their calendar and they see, 2:00 tomorrow, I'm talking with my coach. Oh boy, what am I going to say? I don't really want to talk about anything. That's not a good sign, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if they look at their calendar and say, I get to talk with my coach tomorrow, and I can't wait to unravel this situation that I'm facing or unpack that situation that I'm facing, then that's a great sign that the coaching is value added and having an impact. So that's sort of an informal measure that I use, and I can tell if someone's excited about talking with me. But we also recommend what we call a chemistry meeting. So most of the time when I'm asked to present coaches, and I have a team of coaches that I work with, we'll be asked to present 2 or 3 coaches, which I think is wonderful, because that's a great way of having those conversations up front, having those chemistry sessions, and have the client with the ability to select the coach they want from that sort of menu of coaches. And the company, the sponsoring company, knows that whatever coach is selected has the qualifications, is working from a coaching model. So the experience will have the right level of similarity and then the right level of distinction based on the coach.
Mm-hmm. Which brings me to another question. On the other side of the coin, not you as the coach, but as the coachee, how do you go about selecting a good coach for you? What are your thoughts on that? Is it depending on the approach? What does that depend on?
Yeah. Well, I think most companies' coaching models are similar. So coaching in the corporate world or in the business world is going to be pretty similar no matter where you go to select your coach.
Okay.
I will also say that we don't coach people who are derailing, right? So if you're in a situation where things are not going well, it's not a good job fit, you are derailing or underperforming for some reason, that's not in general a great time to use a coach. So we have a backdrop of wanting to coach people who are high performing, high potential, people who want to expand their toolkit, whether that's growing and having a bigger impact in their current role or getting ready for a role of larger scope. Coaching is a best investment made for people that we would put in those kind of buckets.
That's very interesting. It makes a lot of sense because, at least in my experience too, you don't want to work with anybody, and you have to have some type of criteria as to who you want to help and who you can help, right? And just to your point, like getting somebody who it's already, not performing for whatever reason. It may not be the best use of resources and time and everything to go and try to save that person, when you could be using that time and resources to propel a high performer to even higher levels of achievement and success, right?
Right.
Would you agree with that? Yeah. So
absolutely. And also, from a corporate perspective, you don't want coaching to become a bellwether for this person is failing, right? Oh, they got John a coach. That must mean that he's on his way out the door. That's not what coaching is all about. So I think it's really important to apply coaching in the right situations.
That's interesting. I find, because it happened to me, and I know it happens to a lot of new coaches, at the beginning, when you're starting out, probably out of necessity, you're going to go with anybody, right? And I guess that's part of the learning curve. Like, you have to find those people that were not a good fit, that gave you a lot of headaches and everything, in order for you to learn, that, okay, I need to set up some boundaries here. I need to really, screen the people that I really want to work with or whatnot. But what do you do when you're starting out and you need business?
Well,
with anybody?
I never worked with somebody that I knew that the genesis of the coaching request was because they were underperforming.
Okay.
The surprises that I had were people who wouldn't engage fully, and I got better at that. But I never consciously entered into a coaching relationship with somebody that I knew was underperforming, because I think if you don't believe that that's a value of coaching, how do you jump into that? If you don't believe that's a good application, how do you jump into it?
Right. But I would think also that the part of the challenge for somebody who's in corporate, that, is not their decision to get the coach. Like, they're pressuring into getting coaching. Is that sometimes
no,
how
it should be their decision.
Okay.
Right, because I see coaching as an investment, and so do the corporations I work with. So they're investing in that particular developmental approach for their person who's high performing or high potential. And so if they want a coach, then I don't know how much a partner they are in their continued growth, right? So, and sometimes people can be resistant, but when they understand and believe that it's an investment, they tend to come around. And sometimes I have to do some work on that to help them to understand that it is an investment. And it always helps when I say.
Tell us a little bit about your arm twisting techniques, Sharon.
Well, it's not arm twisting, because they have to come along or not. Right. And usually we sort through that before the actual coaching begins. A lot of times when we do the chemistry call, we talk about that. And I'm upfront about saying I don't coach people who are underperforming or derailing. So if there's any worry in their mind that that's the case, they should relieve themselves of that worry. And sometimes they have to go back and check with their own company and their own sponsors to validate exactly what the reasons are for suggesting a coach. And I would say maybe half the time, somebody who cares about that leader is suggesting a coaching experience. Oftentimes it's a leader who's had their own coaching experience. And then about half the time it's the leader themselves saying, I would really like to work with a coach.
I see. That's interesting. That I guess that takes a complete different level of self-awareness, right?
Yeah, well, which is an important commodity in coaching, right? Is that self-awareness.
For sure. What makes a great coach, in your opinion?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that make a coach really good or great. One is having the background in their craft and having really studied their craft and continuing to study their craft. Like, not be satisfied with a program that you've already completed, but continuously learning new skills, new ideas, new areas of curiosity. and continuing to have that passion for it. You have to love your clients, right? You have to, by the same token, the client looks on the calendar and sees your name pop up. It has to be true the other way around, that
Right.
you feel like you're having an impact with a person and you're helping them become the leader that they want to be. So that passion has to be there. And I think the credibility, I think it's really hard for a 28-year-old person who's never had a deep experience in any field to coach somebody, at least in a business setting, because you have to have that credibility of having been around the block a few times.
But based on what you're saying, you sound like you're a big proponent of people getting certified as coaches. Is that correct?
I support certification. I think it's a great idea. I think the training is more crucial than the certification. And as I mentioned, we have coaches that come from all walks of life, and they've gotten formal training, they've gotten informal training. Some of them are certified by a certifying party and others are not. When I interview coaches to be part of our cadre, I focus more on their coaching capabilities and experiences than I do on certification.
I would like to ask you, if you don't mind, to share with us one technique that you use for a specific result, to get a specific result with someone. Let's say you're, starting with a new client and they're resistant. They're like you were mentioning before, they're very superficial. They don't want to go deeper into any of the real issues. And, you can sense that. How do you go about that?
Well, I start with what we call discovery, which is a common starting step. Mm-hmm. And basically it's getting curious about their background, what got them to this point in their career, what they've loved about their career so far, what's frustrated them about their career, where they feel they're at their best, where they want to head with their career, what they think might be getting in the way. It's just spending some quality time learning about them and what they want. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that greases the skids for me to understand how I can be an impactful coach for them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think just doing that discovery and getting curious is huge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So asking questions, right? A lot of questions about, their goals and the motivations.
Right.
For things. Yeah. So what happens when you discover that, somebody's having a real deep issue that is holding them back, like, tremendously? And it's very obvious to everybody, probably, but the person. Like, how do you go about making them aware that is the actual issue that they need to look at?
Sure. Well, we always have some type of a 360 as an early part of the process. Mm-hmm. With some clients, we use primarily tool-based 360, like benchmarks from the Center for Creative Leadership or voices from Lominger. And sometimes we use a qualitative 360 where I will call and interview stakeholders or people around this person with a core script of questions. But that step of being able to say to the person, whether it's from qualitative data or quantitative data, here's how other people are observing you, or here's how other people are experiencing you, people that are important to your success, whether it's your managers, your peers, or your direct reports. Here's how they're seeing you. Here's how you're showing up. And many times that creates a call for action, because sometimes the person sees it and agrees with the data that I'm presenting to them, and they say, yep, they're right, and it's time for me to do something about it. And other times it's a surprise. And then when it's more of a surprise, you need to slow down a little bit and allow the person to digest it and roll around in it a little bit, and then turn it into some sort of emerge from it, right, with a few key themes, and become ready to turn that into some action steps to show up differently.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the best, like, time frame for you to meet with this person? Do you guys do it regularly, or is it more on a meet me basis? How often do you guys meet?
Right. Well, most often I'm working in 6-month timeframes with a person. So we'll sign up for a 6-month coaching engagement. And we like that because it takes a while to change behavior or to add things on a permanent basis to your toolkit, right? So coaching is all about talking about some sort of action, having the client go and try that action and coming back and talking about it again, tweaking it, trying that action again until it becomes a real part of how they lead. So that kind of a time frame of 6 months is important.
Okay.
And then within that, I as a starting place, I recommend 2 formal conversations a month, about 90 minutes each. And I recommend that for a few reasons. One is because it's a process of trying things and coming back and talking about it, enough time has to elapse between conversations that stuff happens, right? So if we talk too frequently, not enough will have happened to really have a robust conversation. And then if we only talk for an hour, sometimes it takes a while to get to the heart of what the aha is or, what the learning is. And so 90 minutes allows people, I think, more time to exhale and sit back and be a little bit more leisurely about walking through the experience and what they've taken from it, what their learning is, what they still need to do, without rushing off to the next meeting at the next hour.
Right.
So then I'll adjust that based on client wishes and needs, but that's usually my going in suggestion.
That's awesome. What is the first step that somebody considering becoming a coach should be? What is the first thing that they should look at? Who do they reach out to? What needs to happen for somebody to actually, make this happen for them?
Sure. Well, a few things I can think of off the top of my head. One is that they should talk with some coaches and find out what life looks like as a coach, what the coaches enjoy about it, what they find frustrating, because you're not talking about the art of coaching, you're talking about what setting you want to coach in and from what vantage point you want to coach, right? So do you want to be out on your own as a single shingle practitioner? Do you want to be part of a coaching firm? Do you want to be an in-house coach working for a corporation? So whatever path that person thinks they might be interested in, they should talk with and really interview people who are doing that and find out if it's consistent with what they've been imagining.
What do you find frustrating about coaching? What is the biggest pet peeve of yours within coaching?
Well, one we've kind of talked about already is when the client isn't fully into it, right? That can be like pulling teeth. And so I try to avoid those situations. Another thing that I've found frustrating, and I've learned a lot about this, is, if I'm coaching leaders, executives, they're always very busy people. And so there can be a tendency, if you need to find an hour on your calendar because some crisis is happening or something really important has just popped, there can be a tendency to look at your calendar and say, oh, I can move that coach in that hour, that 90 minutes. So I've learned that upfront sort of designing that agreement and the guidelines and the mutual commitment is really important. And that limits that, which can be a huge frustration, right? Let's say I've got my afternoon planned and I'm going to coach 2 different people, and then they both cancel on me or postpone on me. It's kind of ruined that afternoon. So we talk very, very early in the process about that mutual commitment to each other. And certainly if a client has an emergency, that's fine, that's life. But I find by doing that, it really reduces and makes the client think twice or 3 times about canceling me.
Right. You have to become a priority. Well, you're a commitment. That's why you're making it. Sharon, share with me the best 2 books that you could recommend anyone looking to either be a coach or enhance their self-awareness. What are those 2 books that are life-changing for you?
Oh boy. I don't know if I have books so much as
Mhm.
articles, and I don't
Okay.
know how much they apply to coaching.
Okay.
So
Life changing. That's
one,
what we're looking for.
right,
Life changing. Self
right,
awareness.
right. So one Harvard Business Review article that I'll mention to you is called "Who's Got the Monkey?" and
Mm-hmm.
it's about managing time, and it's by William Onken, and he also has a book by the same name called Managing Management Time, and it's a classic. I think it was published in the 70s.
Awesome.
And basically what it does is suggest a management process, right? So and helping all of those around you to sort of work at the top of their credential. And basically it pursues the idea that if you have a team of people working with you, for you, they're your direct reports, that you don't want to establish an environment where they come to you and say, "What should I do, boss?" Right? You want to establish the opposite of that, which is somewhere between, "I think we should do this, this, and this, okay?" So the manager has the chance to say, "Yes, great, do it," or maybe tweak this and this and go do it. Or even all the way to the point of saying, "This just happened and I did this and I want you to know about it." And so to me, as a leader, more so than as a coach, that has been a crucial article or mindset or way of thinking about really how to position your team and how to grow your team and how to groom them as people who are thoughtful contributors versus people who are task fulfillers. And I use that a lot in my coaching because that's something that comes up, honestly, quite a bit is leaders who aren't deploying their team as effectively as they could. So that's
Pure
definitely
gold. Pure gold. Tell me the last name of the author again, please.
Onken, Oncken, I believe. I didn't know there was going to be a spelling test as a part of this.
That's okay. No, it just, I got to get it right. I'll put a link down below in the description. Sharon, one last thought for someone who's like really desiring to be a coach. What would you say to them?
Well, if they have passion for it, that's wonderful. So that's a great signal that they should pursue it. And then I think they should decide where they want to apply their coaching and make sure they can add value in that arena.
Awesome. Phenomenal. Sharon, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. This has been phenomenal. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I cannot do it enough. For now, Thank you, Sharon. And for all you listening and watching, till next time, let's get out there and start changing lives one session at a time. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.